My mom took my entire college fund to throw a wedding for my golden child sister. When I asked about my future, she laughed and said, "You're not marriage material anyway." A month later, after I built my dream company from scratch, they showed up crying. I said, "I don't know you," and closed the door. "College?" my mother asked, swirling wine in her glass like she was auditioning for a bad soap opera. "You'll be fine. You're not marriage material anyway." I blinked, unsure I'd heard her right. "I mean, look at you. You code in the dark. You don't go out. You've never even had a boyfriend. Be realistic." She said it with a laugh. A light, flippant, cruel thing. Like what she'd just done wasn't the kind of betrayal that leaves a person altered forever. That was the night she told me they used my entire college fund to pay for my sister's wedding. Let me back up. I grew up in Middlebury, Vermont. It's one of those picturesque New England towns where fall looks like a postcard and people still greet each other at the grocery store. On the surface, our family looked just as polished: white picket fence, holiday cards, piano recitals. But underneath that Norman Rockwell aesthetic, it was a family that revolved around one person, my older sister, Isolde. Isolde was golden from the minute she was born. Blonde hair, doll-like features, dazzling smile. Straight A's, prom queen, piano prodigy. The kind of girl teachers fawned over and boys stumbled over their own words to talk to. I was the opposite. The second daughter. The quiet one. I was smart, yes, but not the kind of smart that gets praised in family dinners. I was the girl who coded in her room, built apps for fun, and read books about data encryption at lunch. I wasn't pretty by Clarice's standards, yes. I called my mother by her name in my head, and I didn't care to be. I just wanted out. Out of Middlebury. Out of that house. Out of that dynamic. But I had one thing that was mine: my college fund. My grandfather, the only person who ever treated me like I mattered, set up education trusts for both of us. Equal amounts. $75,000 each, accessible after high school graduation for higher education. So while Clarice was busy fawning over Isolde's new boyfriend, Travis, the local quarterback turned real estate agent, I was quietly applying to computer science programs and planning my move to Boston. I wasn't looking for attention. I just needed that fund. It was my lifeline. Things started to unravel quickly the summer before my senior year. Isolde got engaged. Travis proposed on the dock at Lake Dunmore, complete with a drone to record the whole thing. Clarice cried like it was a royal engagement. The planning started the next day. And it got expensive. Venue. Catering. Dress fittings. A live orchestra. Doves. There was even talk of a customized sculpture. I asked once, lightly, "This is a lot. Isn't it?" Clarice smiled. "You only get married once." I let it go. Then, one day in late September, I came home from my shift at the library to find Clarice sitting at the dining table like she was waiting for me. Her wine glass was already half full. "We've finalized the venue," she said. The Heartland Estate. That was one of the most expensive event spaces in the state. Isolde really had her heart set on it. And we made it work. We used your college fund. You weren't planning on a fancy school anyway, right? I remember standing there in complete silence. Her words weren't even registering. They were just noise. When I finally said, "You what?" it came out in a whisper. Clarice waved her hand like I was being dramatic. "Oh, don't act like this is the end of the world. You'll figure it out. You always do." I asked why she'd do that. Why she'd take something that was meant for my future. She laughed and said, "Alina, you're not marriage material. You don't even like people. You're not going to end up with anyone who needs a fancy wedding." There it was. Not only had she stolen my only means of escape, she'd dismissed my entire existence in one smug breath. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even cry that night. Instead, I packed. Quietly. Methodically. I applied to every full scholarship tech program I could find. I emailed startup incubators. I built a basic beta version of an app idea I'd been sitting on for months, something that could help small businesses protect their client data affordably. A month later, I was gone. I left Middlebury in the middle of the night. No goodbye. No explanation. They didn't call. Not once. I lived in a basement sublet in Dorchester for 6 months. Ate instant noodles, worked out of public libraries, showered in gyms. I pushed out the final version of the app, Veillock, on a hope and a shoestring budget. It got traction faster than I expected. An investor from an MIT pitch event gave me seed money. A year later, we had office space and employees. 2 years in, we had international clients. I had my own apartment in Beacon Hill. I went from 0 to 8 figures in under 3 years. All without them. Then came last winter. It had been years since I'd heard anything about them. Occasionally I'd hear snippets from people back home. Isolde's marriage wasn't going well. My dad's job at the law firm had folded after a wrongdoing. Clarice had taken out a second mortgage. But they were just rumors. Until they showed up. I was leaving the office late, coat half-zipped, when my receptionist buzzed. "There's a woman here. Says she's your mom. She's crying." I hesitated. My whole body went cold. I walked out to the lobby, and there they were. Clarice, pale and thinner than I remembered. Isolde, standing behind her looking hollow. My father, silent as ever. Clarice stepped forward. "Alina, we didn't know who else to turn to. We lost the house. Isolde's divorce, well, it's been messy. Your dad had some legal issues. We're out of options." They were looking at me like I was their savior. Like I owed them something. I stared at them. The people who told me I wasn't worth an education. Who laughed when I asked about my future. Who let me walk out of that house and never once asked where I went. All I could say was, "I don't know you." And then I turned and walked back inside. I didn't expect the silence to hit me the way it did. When I closed that door behind me, there wasn't any music swelling in the background. No satisfaction. No dramatic weight lifted from my shoulders. Just a cold, echoing quiet that followed me all the way up the elevator, into my apartment, and stayed with me as I sat at the edge of my bed, coat still on. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I thought maybe I'd laugh. Maybe cry. But all I felt was tired. Bone-deep tired, like I'd just finished a marathon I didn't train for. They were gone. But now they were real again. And real meant I had to face the fact that, for all the ways I'd moved on, they still lived rent-free in the corners of my mind I never dared to clean out. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my CTO, not my one friend from college who still checked in every few weeks. I didn't want advice. I didn't want pity. I just needed to sit with it. That weekend, I drove north. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just got in the car and went. I ended up back in Middlebury without even planning it, muscle memory, I guess. It looked the same. The same old bakery still had cinnamon rolls written in fading red chalk on the window. The gas station still had one pump out of order. The house wasn't ours anymore. I parked across the street and stared at it for a long time. A new family had moved in. The porch was painted now, a soft green, and there were plastic tricycles scattered on the front lawn. The ivy had been trimmed back. It didn't look haunted anymore. I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I drove past my high school, the public library where I used to volunteer, and then to the little coffee shop where I'd first sketched out Veillock on the back of a napkin. The place had changed owners. Different name. Same smell, espresso and old wood. I sat in the corner booth and watched people come and go. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe some sign that the past was behind me. That I'd become someone who could look back without bleeding. But I wasn't there yet. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. They hadn't tried again. A part of me, the girl I used to be, was almost disappointed. Was I really that easy to give up on? Again? Back in Boston, I got hit with a flood of memories I hadn't asked for. Clarice humming while she arranged flowers in the kitchen, her voice sharp when she talked about wasted potential anytime I brought up tech stuff. Isolde stealing my journal when we were kids and reading it aloud to her friends. My dad not defending me when Clarice threw away my college brochures and said I was better off learning a trade. I thought time would make those things blurry. It didn't. It just made them quieter and more dangerous because of it. Like a leak you don't notice until it floods your house. That night, I dug out an old flash drive I hadn't looked at in years. It had the first version of my code on it, lines written when I was 18, sitting in a freezing basement on a second-hand laptop. There were notes scribbled in the margins of each file, written to myself like I was the only person in the world who'd understand. You'll get out. You're not her. This is yours. I sat there with it in my hands and let myself cry for the first time in years. Not because of what they'd done recently, but because of what they'd done for so long. A week later, a letter arrived at the office. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. It was addressed in shaky handwriting. No return address. I didn't open it for 3 days. Just stared at it on my desk like it might explode. When I finally did, it was from Clarice. Not long. 2 pages, handwritten. Rambling in that way people write when they're out of pride but still clinging to control. She talked about how hard things had been since everything fell apart. How they never meant to hurt me. How they thought I was strong enough to make it on my own, and that Isolde was in a bad place and needed the help more at the time. No real apology. Just a half-hearted admission that they'd probably made mistakes. And then came the line that stuck with me. Family isn't perfect, but it's all we have. We hope you'll come home someday. Home. As if that word hadn't been razed to the ground long ago. I tore the letter in half. Then into quarters. Then into a pile of paper dust that I brushed off my desk without a second thought. The thing about boundaries is, people think they're walls. Something you put up in a moment of anger. But they're not. They're fences you build slowly, brick by brick, every time someone crosses a line and pretends they didn't. I hadn't built a wall. I'd built a fortress. Not because I wanted revenge. But because survival demanded it. I'd spent my whole life being the forgotten daughter, the contingency plan, the emotional punching bag. I learned early how to take care of myself because no one else would. And when the time came, I did what I had to do. I chose me. They didn't like it. They called it cold, cruel, selfish. But I finally understood that it was none of those things. It was necessary. The holidays came. For most people, that time of year means family, tradition, maybe even nostalgia. For me, it was just a long stretch of time where I avoided grocery stores playing old Christmas music and tried not to think about how much I used to crave a version of that life. My team had closed our biggest contract to date a week before Thanksgiving. A cybersecurity deal with a major insurance firm based out of Chicago. I should have been celebrating. But instead, I kept checking my phone like someone was going to reach out again. No one did. I still hadn't told anyone about the visit. Not my best friend Mira, not my mentor, not even my therapist, who I'd started seeing after my company hit series of funding and the stress nearly burned me out. I kept it locked inside like a shameful secret, because in some twisted way, I still felt responsible for the wreckage. And that's the thing no one tells you about being the scapegoat child. Even after you escape, even after you win, there's a part of you that's always waiting for the punishment that used to come after moments of joy. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I didn't celebrate. I worked. I ran numbers, reviewed code, and set up next quarter's roadmap. The night before the holiday, Mira invited me to her family's dinner. I declined. Don't make a tradition of this, she said gently. It's okay to have people. You know that, right? I nodded, but I didn't believe it. That night, I sat by my window watching snow fall over the brownstones. The city was quiet. Lights twinkled in the windows across the street. I thought about the version of me that used to sit on a creaky bed back in Middlebury, listening to the faint sound of piano from downstairs while she dreamed of anything else. And I thought about how I never really let anyone in. Not fully. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I got a LinkedIn message from Travis. Yes, that Travis. Isolde's ex-husband. I stared at the screen for a long time before I clicked. Hey Alina, sorry for the random message. I know things are probably complicated. I just wanted to say. I always admired how you handled yourself. I hope life's treating you better than the way your family did. You deserved more than any of them ever gave you. It wasn't much. But it stopped me cold. We'd barely spoken when I lived at home. He was too absorbed in the Isolde show to ever notice me. But now? Years later, he was reaching out to say, what? That I was right? It felt strange. Unsettling. Like someone had reached through time and handed my younger self a small, overdue apology. I didn't reply. I didn't know what to say. But it haunted me for days afterward. Not because it changed anything. But because it made me realize how many people probably saw what was happening to me, and said nothing. 2 weeks before Christmas, I was walking out of a meeting downtown when I saw someone I didn't expect. Isolde. She was standing across the street outside a bookstore, hugging a coat too thin for the weather. Her hair was darker now, shorter. She looked tired. She wasn't looking at me. She was just staring into the window, lost in thought. I ducked into the nearest cafe before she could see me and sat there, heart pounding. I hadn't seen her since the office visit. I didn't know what she'd do if she saw me, cry, yell, beg. Maybe nothing. I watched her from behind the frosted glass for several minutes. She didn't go in the bookstore. She just turned and walked away. I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. I couldn't decide what unsettled me more, seeing her like that, or the fact that part of me wanted to talk to her. Not for reconciliation. Not for closure. Just to understand. Because despite everything, despite the wedding, the betrayal, the decades of favoritism and silence, I had no idea who she really was outside of the role they made her play. And I wondered if she knew who she was either. After the new year, the letter came. Another one. This time, from Isolde. Typed. Formal. Emotionally cautious. She addressed it to Alina like she wasn't sure I'd even read past the first word. I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness, not a response. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just for the wedding. For everything. I was the golden child, but that came with its own cage. I see that now. You were sacrificed so I could shine. That wasn't fair. It wasn't right. She wrote about her divorce. About therapy. About realizing she'd been raised to value herself based on how pretty or pleasing she was. You got out. You built a life that didn't revolve around anyone's approval. I admire that. I envy it. I know it probably cost you more than you'll ever say. But I see you now. I do. And I'm sorry. There were no asks. No invitations. No please call me. Just an apology. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt conflicted. Because this wasn't Clarice deflecting blame or my dad pretending he didn't know. This was my sister, finally saying out loud what I'd screamed inside my own mind for years. I didn't respond. Not right away. I sat with it. I thought about the girl who left home with a duffel bag and a list of code snippets. I thought about the woman I'd become. I wondered if there was space in her life for anything other than work and distance. And I asked myself something I'd never dared to ask before: what happens after survival? Because that's what my whole life had been. Just surviving. I never made room for what came next. I didn't trust people. I didn't date. I didn't let friendships go deeper than coffee and shared deadlines. I didn't dream beyond the next funding round or product launch. And for the first time, I wondered if it was time to want something more. Not forgiveness. Not family. But maybe healing. Maybe. A week passed before I touched the letter again. It stayed on my kitchen counter, weighed down by a ceramic mug, like it might float away otherwise. Every morning, I'd walk by it. Sometimes I'd reread a line or two. Sometimes I just stared at the envelope, wondering how long a soul had waited to send it. How many times she'd rewritten it. Whether she'd cried writing it. Or if, like me, she'd long forgotten how to cry for real. I didn't tell anyone. Still. Not even Mira, though she noticed something was off. "You've been in your head lately," she said one afternoon over lunch. I shrugged. "Just tired." "You're always tired," she said. "This is different." I didn't say anything. How could I explain that someone from a past I'd tried to amputate was reaching out, not with another wound, but with a bandage? And I didn't know what to do with it. That Saturday, I walked to the Charles River Esplanade. I used to go there all the time when I first moved to Boston. Something about the still water and the way the wind cut through your coat made you feel like you could survive anything. I took the letter with me. I sat on a bench, unfolded the pages, and read them again, this time, slower. Letting the words in without the immediate armor. Isolde didn't make excuses. She didn't blame our mother. She didn't deflect. She owned it. In clean, precise language, she acknowledged what she'd benefited from, what I'd endured, and how none of it could ever be undone. That mattered. It did. But it didn't fix anything. And that was the part that made it hard. Because we're taught that apologies are supposed to be the turning point. That they come with an implied roadmap for reconciliation. But this one didn't offer directions. It just sat there, raw and open-ended, like a trail that ends at a cliff. And I was left standing at the edge. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the version of Isolde who wrote that letter. Not the glossy wedding version. Not the perfect daughter. But the woman who had watched her carefully constructed life fall apart, who had looked back at our childhood and seen something closer to the truth. And maybe that was the most shocking part. That she saw it now. That she said it aloud. It didn't erase the hurt, or the years of silence. But it made me realize something I'd never allowed myself to admit: I missed having a sister. Not the girl I grew up with. Not the rival. But the person she might have been if we'd been raised differently. Fairly. What would we have been if we weren't pitted against each other? If love wasn't a competition? If survival hadn't been the only goal? I didn't know. And I wasn't sure I'd ever find out. But maybe I could open a door. Just a crack. Just enough to let in the possibility. I sat with that idea for a while. I wrote a response in my notes app. Deleted it. Wrote another. Deleted that one, too. It wasn't until one night, after a particularly bad day at work, a client had been hacked, ironically, because they ignored our protocols, that I sat on my kitchen floor with a glass of wine and opened a new draft. Isolde, I got your letter. I've read it several times. Thank you. That's not forgiveness. Not yet. But I want you to know that I see the effort. I recognize the honesty. I don't have a space in my life for our old roles. I'm not interested in pretending nothing happened. But if what you wrote is real, if you meant it, maybe we can start something new. Something small. No expectations. One conversation. That's all I can offer right now. I hit send before I could overthink it. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. I didn't sleep, but I didn't panic either. For once, I just waited. She replied the next morning. That's more than I hoped for. I'd really like that. Just say when. No emojis. No overexcitement. Just simple, respectful, careful. And somehow, that felt right. We agreed to meet for coffee the following week. Neutral territory. No memories. No ghosts. Just a small cafe in Somerville where no one knew our names. When I walked in, she was already there. No makeup. A turtleneck and jeans. Nervous, but composed. She stood when she saw me, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then we sat. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just talked. About small things at first: work, weather, her new apartment. Then, slowly, the layers began to peel back. She told me about therapy. About unlearning the idea that being loved meant being perfect. About how empty the pedestal felt once she saw it for what it was. I told her about the fear that I'd never be capable of trusting anyone again. About how I still heard our mother's voice in my head when I succeeded, telling me it wasn't enough. We didn't fix everything. Not in 1 hour. Not even close. But we started. When I got home, there was a voicemail on my phone. A number I didn't recognize. But I knew who it was. Clarice. Her voice was thin, almost unfamiliar. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention the visit to my office. She didn't say anything about the money, or the wedding, or the years of neglect. All she said was, "I heard you met with your sister. That's good. I'm glad. I hope you're well." And then she hung up. No return number. No invitation to call back. Just a whisper into the void. I didn't delete it. I didn't save it either. I just let it sit there, a tiny crack in a wall that had held for years. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not some grand epiphany or cinematic reunion. But slow, uneven steps in a direction you swore you'd never walk again. The voicemail from Clarice stayed on my phone for 3 weeks. I never returned the call. Something in her tone, it wasn't desperation, exactly. It was resignation. Like she'd finally realized that the golden pedestal she built for herself and her favorite child had collapsed into dust, and now she had no idea how to walk on even ground. But I wasn't going to go down with her. I kept living. Isolde and I stayed in touch after that coffee meeting. Not often, and never too deep. We didn't pretend to be best friends. But we shared a new language now, one rooted in honesty, in mutual grief for the childhood we could have had, and a cautious respect for the different ways we'd both survived. Eventually, she started helping out part-time at a nonprofit that taught financial literacy to women leaving emotionally abusive relationships. I didn't ask if that was connected to her divorce. She didn't offer. It didn't matter. We were rebuilding something, not from nostalgia, but from truth. And that was enough. The company, Veil Lock, grew fast. Too fast, honestly. By the end of the next year, I was fielding buyout offers from 2 Fortune 500 firms. My board was pressuring me to consider. The idea of selling made me nauseous, but it also made sense. I was tired. Not just physically. I'd built this thing from ashes. And now it was time to build something else. Something for me. I agreed to sell. The final offer, $84 million. My name was in Forbes. Some puff piece titled, "The Girl They Counted Out, How Alina Royce Built an Empire from Betrayal." They asked for family photos. I said I didn't have any. And here's where the real revenge begins. A week after the article went live, I got another letter. This one was from Clarice again. This time, it was different. Not typed. Not even a full page. I read about the company. Congratulations. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I burned every bridge. But I'm not proud of how things ended. I'm not proud of who I was. I'm asking, selfishly, maybe, if you'd consider helping us. Your father's health is worse. We're on the brink of losing everything. If nothing else, think of it as a chance to close the loop. You've already won. I'm just asking for a little mercy. That line. You've already won. It struck something in me. Because she was right. I had won. But not in the way she thought. She thought I'd won because of the money. The success. The press. But the real victory was that I no longer needed anything from her. I wasn't her daughter in waiting. I wasn't the forgotten one hoping to be seen. I was free. Still, I wanted her to feel it. Not as punishment. But as clarity. So I wrote back. Clarice, you're right, I did win. Not because of the money, or the company, but because I finally understood I don't owe you anything. I spent years learning how to live without you. Without your approval, your support, your love. I built something beautiful from the pieces you left behind. You were right about one thing, I'm not marriage material. I'm empire material. And I won't be funding your mistakes. That was the cost of what you took from me. I wish you peace, truly. But I won't be part of your story anymore. I signed it and mailed it to her address in Rutland, the one I'd found in the background of a public Facebook post Isolde had once liked. A week later, the envelope was returned. Not deliverable as addressed. No forwarding address. It felt poetic. Clarice had vanished. Just like she vanished when I needed her. The difference now was that I no longer waited for her to return. I bought a brownstone near Cambridge. One with big windows, a home office with natural light, and a little reading nook where I kept a framed copy of my first patent approval. I donated a significant portion of the buyout funds to create a tech scholarship fund for girls from low-income households, specifically those who'd been told they weren't cut out for tech, or life, or big dreams. I named the fund after my grandfather. Not Clarice. Not the Royce family. Just the one man who believed in me before I even understood what that meant. One spring afternoon, a young woman, barely 19, stood at the podium of a fundraising gala I hosted, thanking the fund for allowing her to study at MIT. She talked about her app that was gaining traction. About how her family didn't understand her, but she was doing it anyway. Afterward, she came up to me and said, "Thank you for seeing us." I looked at her, so much younger than me, but already with that fire. And I said, "No. Thank you for proving them wrong." That's how I closed the chapter. Not with fury. Not with bitterness. But with a legacy. They built me to be nothing. And I turned into something unforgettable.